Hello, friends, and welcome back to Film Chewing and the Oscars Project. Today we are discussing The Sound of Music, the best picture of 1965. This film, my first time seeing it, of course, it's a well-known movie. You know, I've seen scenes of it over the years, and you hear the songs, and a lot of songs I recognize, and oh, that's from this movie. So I'm here with Jared and Chris, and this movie took a turn at the end, but we'll get into it. But Jared and Chris, can you give us introductions and tell us how many times you've seen this movie before this rewatch?
I'm Jared, head to Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and various podcasts here on Page Chewing, including Speculations and some other fine ones as well. And yeah, I had never seen the whole thing. I've seen bits and pieces like you, bits and pieces, and of course heard the songs pretty much all my life. Very catchy tunes, and like they're very popular songs, yeah. But it was interesting to watch it the whole way through.
Yes, my name's Chris Moen from Chris Moen, the YouTube channel, and I was thinking about this earlier on. I wondered how many times you would have seen this, because this feels very much like a rite of passage for anybody that brought up in Britain at a very young age. It was always on TV, all the time. If I had to guess how many times I've seen Sound of Music, maybe 20, 25 times.
Wow.
In my lifetime, like from your really young kid to kind of get through it. Maybe not the whole thing the whole way through, because maybe a lot of those were just scenes that when we were a bit younger. But this is a well-watched movie, and the most recent time I watched it was about a month ago. So I'd seen it quite recently as well, because again, rite of passage. My children are like, "Oh, but I think we should watch The Sound of Music. I hear it's good." And then subsequently, my daughter is in a stage production of it ongoing at the moment. So yes, very much in the zeitgeist, I suppose.
Well. Yeah, it's. I can see why this would be on TV a lot. I mean, but it is a long movie. It's really long.
Wow. It's really long.
It's really long. But you know, the more musicals we watch through this project, I do have a greater appreciation for West Side Story, because the amount of dancing and choreography that went into that was wild. When you really compare the other musicals we've seen, not that there isn't choreography and dancing and all that kind of thing, but there's so much movement in West Side Story almost constantly, and it's really impressive looking back on how much went into that one.
Yeah, I agree. That's these last couple we've seen have had a little bit of dancing here and there, but not to that level. I think the songwriting is really great in this one, in The Sound of Music. I was telling these guys earlier that the tunes are very catchy. Mm-hmm. I've always known that the opening song my whole life, and it's like been used in commercials. It's been used in, even the scene itself has been used in commercials, and I didn't realize it was basically the opening of the movie. That song is the opening of the movie with the Alps and all that stuff, and I was just like, oh wow, getting this over with right away.
Yeah.
It's I've said this before. I wasn't involved in the West Side Story, but West Side Story is peerless for me in terms of film musicals. But it does harken back to the slightly earlier age, when in the 50s, etc., when things were very overly choreographed. Even if you look at the Christmas movies of like Holiday Inn, White Christmas and stuff, the Bing Crosby ones, very heavily choreographed, very reminiscent of the stage in that stage. And I think you're sort of seeing a move away at this time towards more dramatized things with songs. You can see the move through the 60s in that ilk, and we've got one more to come in this decade as well that I think goes even further that way. More drama with great songs to it, but there's no doubt about it. I think of all of the stories in terms of story arc, I still think West Side Story is just the retelling of Romeo and Juliet's magnificent in it, but I think this one has the biggest most expansive story arc, if you know what I mean, out of them all. It's much more akin to Lawrence of Arabia, I think, in some ways in terms of its scope. Without maybe the grandeur of that, but kind of that level. When you think of My Fair Lady, which basically go to the races and then they're in a house.
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty much the scope of My Fair Lady. Some great tunes in that, but very much a dramatic piece with songs. And this one kind of combines all of those things from the previous years. And I know I've said this previously, but if you're going to win in the same genre the next year, it has to move the conversation along a little bit, in terms of what they're doing with film, for it to be recognised as better than last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it does have a bit more of a worldly feel as far as the impact that's being portrayed. Like this isn't just a person's singular story, a personal transformation like we had in My Fair Lady, or just a small turf gang war like we had in West Side Story. It actually encompasses the oncoming of the biggest war we've seen, and so it captures that pretty well, and a lot of its camera shots and stuff like that. They're very expansive. They're big. You see all the hills and stuff, and you see even when they're inside the house is grand. The setting of the ballrooms and the balconies and stuff it's all very grand and expansive, and it kind of points to that kind of this is a big story.
Beautiful scenery though.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, gorgeous. Do places like this still exist? Because I want to go.
I mean, I would say so. Yes, I'd say a lot of Europe's still undeveloped, and kind of the hills and stuff. People don't really build houses on mountains, or big estates and houses and stuff. So, like I'd say, like even here, there's still quite large expanses of land that is untouched and has great views. But I'm sure it was great fun doing the location scouting to get those kind of spots where they travel around, take a camera at the top, take a few pictures, and go, oh yes, we'll have to film this location. Has to be captured and shown on screen, because that's the stuff wins the Oscars. It even worked for Tom Jones.
Well, I would say it worked for Peter Jackson. That's what I would say.
Yes, that's right.
He did that very thing with the New Zealand landscape, and so that's what it reminded me of. That's just that kind of grand, expansive wilderness, Alp mountain view there. It's great.
Yeah, that looked. The next one is A Man for All Seasons, and I was wondering if we had another musical, but it looks like it's historical fiction, historical drama.
Yeah, I think 69 is the next musical. I think it's Oliver is coming up.
All right.
Another rite of passage British film.
One thing I was impressed with this film was Maria's character arc. I thought it was pretty well played out, because when we're in that opening scenes and stuff with her in the hills and in the convent with the other nuns, at first I thought that the hills kind of represented this lure or temptation for her, to be away from the convent and out in freedom, like a temptation of freedom. And then as the story went along, and it seemed like she was the conflict at the beginning. She was the problem,
Yes.
and what are the nuns going to do with her? And, and then after meeting the family, meeting the kids, getting involved with that life, her character changes, and the hills become the freedom, the rescue of the family, and as she looks at it a different way, she's not just getting rescued herself, she's rescuing her, what she now knows as her clutch, her clan, her family, and it's not just the hills aren't just her being wishful freedom. It's actually realistic freedom for everyone came into contact with and fell in love with, and that whole process I thought was signified very well by all that wonderful scenery and wonderful camera work.
Yeah, it's a great point because the hills sort of represent escape in general. Because, as you say at the start, it's escape from the closed confines of the monastery, essentially, where they're in the nunnery, where they're staying. But it also provides the way that they escape from the terror that is coming, and it kind of goes with it. It's a really nice bit of very nice observation. The thing that strikes me about Sound of Music is how much it mirrors a lot of Mary Poppins that came the year beforehand. That also had Julie Andrews in it, because essentially she comes along as the nanny for the kids and transforms the life of the kids. And this one essentially has that, but with the underlying romance subplot that Mary Poppins didn't have within the family, but had outside. But in this one, it's very much about healing, not just the family, but healing the father. In this case, the captain in this, and it has that an add-on. And yet we have this whole extended coda at the end that does then touch on the political nature of Europe at that time. It sort of creeps up in you, and I really like that idea of it creeping up in you, because I'm sure that's what it felt like at the time, in terms of, like, as we tend to do even in current world, kind of look at conflicts near us but kind of go, it's not really relevant, it doesn't touch me, until the point that it did, and it became very much, they couldn't escape it. It sort of happened all of a sudden to the point that they kind of went, we are trapped again, we are in the confines here and can't get out, even though we thought we were above this, had freedom, had status, had class, and all of that kind of thing to take them out of it, but they weren't from that, and done in multiple ways, which was really nice as well.
It does creep up on you, because there are some people towards the beginning of the film that kind of the Nazi, kind of fall in line people, and it kind of builds and builds and builds, and then it's in your face and you're trapped. So yeah, that is a great point, because I wondered, I was surprised with how kind of it felt a little bit abrupt, but when you put it that way, it does make sense. At the time, it kind of like came out of nowhere, or it was a kind of something that people talked about, and then before you knew it, it was in your face. You couldn't escape it.
Yeah. It was pretty good. I thought it was well done, like you said, Chris. Because there were little tiny hints here and there, thrown in there, and where the guy is like putting his nose up at the Austrian flag and stuff, and and early on, and so it was. Yeah, I thought that was well done. I really like how the like some of the camera work I was saying, it was also very good set direction, like the lighting and everything that was going on. Whenever there was a calm scene where one character, especially when like Christopher Plummer is, you see his feelings soften towards Maria. All of a sudden his image is not sharp anymore. It's kind of hazy. It's kind of it's just a softer image, and you see that in the lighting and stuff like that. They did that, like when he first appears, he's all strict and stuff, and the lighting's very sharp, and everything's like. And then when they have when he's watching her from the veranda or whatever that thing was, all of a sudden he's in this soft lighting, and he has a different glow about him. And they did that in a lot of places. They did that with the daughter in the post kid, when they were dancing in the thing. There was all soft lighting. It was a romantic type of thing. But then later on, when they encounter him, the little jerk,
you called it.
Then he's like very sharp in contrast, and he's in his Nazi uniform, and the lighting's different, and he's not soft, he's hard now, and I love how they played with that kind of stuff. That's like that's stuff I really like to pay attention to, because it really means stuff when they're doing it right.
That kind of stuff, I think, is one of the things that the Oscars kind of helps with, because when you go to, they just don't give out 3 or 4 awards, and it's not like best film, best actor, best music.
Yeah.
They break it down into edit and cinematography, etc. So it forces people to watch it in those kind of terms and watch films in those kind of levels, to kind of say, look, this isn't just a nice story. The filmmaking and etc. that's involved here, and it's why an awful lot of those films tend to just get nominated for the same categories, if you know what I mean, the whole way across, because that's the kind of level that they're getting looked at. In a similar kind of way to the filmmaking, I think this one integrates the idea of music much more into the plot, rather than in a lot of other of the musicals we've seen. They just sort of break into song as a virtue or replacement for dialogue. In this one, the music is very much part of the healing part of music, and especially the scene with Edelweiss is very much where the crack starts to show in his humanity and all of that kind of stuff. He's not just a domineering father. He has a side to him. Oh, he can sing and play and stuff. It softens him to his children, and I think the music is used a couple of times, even with Do Re Mi, the song, etc., teaching the kids that idea. It's almost like the training scene from Rocky in its own way.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, with the kids, and then making the curtains, and then they're traveling through, etc. So it's very much part of not just the story and the filmmaking, but it's very purposeful. The use of music is part of the story.
These kids are quick learners too. They learned. They're
great.
Yeah. Overnight, they were jamming.
I've been trying to learn that for 20 years. This hasn't happened yet.
See, it just goes to show the power. Like iPads and all are just ruining the current generation. If we didn't have iPads, kids would learn songs really quickly like that. They could be like the Von Trapps.
And speaking of the kids, I mean, I think they all did a really phenomenal job.
Yeah.
And 7 kids, Jesus. I mean.
Yeah, if there was, I can imagine that happening now. All the ages need to be able to act a bit. That isn't like a case you need a token cute kid. That happens in an awful lot of movies. We don't need them to say much. They just need to look cute, and that'll do. But everybody has a role to play in this, story-wise, as much as anything. Obviously, culminating in the going to bed scene that every kid in Britain had to perform at least once for visiting friends of their parents.
Did they really have to perform that? Was that a thing?
I mean, I would say most kids did that at some stage in Britain. Like, I'd be surprised if there was of a certain age. I would say pretty much everybody had that down pat. Again, everybody had seen the film, so it was just like, if you didn't want to go to bed and your mum and dad had company, you got to stay up a bit longer by at least mimicking that scene. You mightn't do the whole thing. I mean, there probably wasn't 7 of you, but you could get an extra 10-15 minutes out of staying up.
That's funny. Yeah. And I really like how they handled the relationship between what is he? Is he the captain? He's a captain. Between the captain and the Baroness, and how they handled that whole transition for him, with him finally coming to terms with their relationship. That could have, they knew they were in love with each other. The Baroness knew they were in love with each other. That could have turned into campy, comedic effect, where you had the captain, and and Maria at cross purposes, or not saying the right thing, or having like they do in all the romantic comedies. It takes them an hour just to realize they love each other, and they didn't do that here. They were adults about it. The characters were adults about it, and they actually talked through it, and they actually came to reasonable, conclusions. And I found that actually quite refreshing, to be honest with you, compared to so many other movies where they just drag out the misunderstandings and the miscues and all that stuff, and they just drag it out and drag it out, and as a viewer, you're just like, oh, come on, everybody sees it, and but they didn't do that here, and I really actually appreciated that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, they could have gone for more of the drama, the conflict, but they did a good job, I think, avoiding that in the I'll Talk Like Adults. But am I the only one who felt sorry for the Baroness a little bit?
Yeah, I mean,
mainly because she was very reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, she wasn't a wicked witch. She wasn't a character to be hated. She was hated in the sense that she didn't really have time for his family in the same way that Maria did. But then that was not her station. That was not what her purpose was in that regard. She was not the mother of those children, so it would be unfair to label her as a bad person because of that. But she was very reasonable, and so her being sidelined is like unfortunate for her. But again, imagine if they had played that out. It'd have been a 4.5-hour movie. Jesus.
Yeah. Plus,
I'd have given that up.
She's rich, so she'll be fine.
What was the line she gave when she left? She's like, "I'm gonna go back to my life," or something like, "I'm rich. Bye."
Yeah.
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
That was hilarious when she's trying to play ball with the kids, and the last kid like chucks it at her and almost knocks her over. It's like, oh man.
Interesting that obviously this is based on a true story.
Really?
Although there was an actual Von Trapp family and, married in much the same way. Probably dramatised for extent, but yeah, they were a singing family and a travelling singing family and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. My wife was telling me that the Von Trumps were actually a real family, and I think there's I think she said there's actually relatives of them in Vermont somewhere. But so
where
yeah,
the hills
you're right.
are alive. The hills are alive in Vermont.
The Green Mountains, yeah, they're alive with ice cream and pot, I think. But yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, it is. I'm sure it's loosely based, but it was. I just wonder how much of that was like how quickly they needed to flee and how much interaction they actually had with the Nazis moving in, and were there similar circumstances about trying to get away under the cover of a show or something like that, or
that bit is very much made up, but I don't doubt that they did feel the need to escape from that kind of regime at that time, and the oppressiveness and that kind of stuff, as a lot of artists did right through. Like a lot of film directors left Europe during that time and went to America to work and stuff during that time. Anybody on the arts was being very much controlled at that stage to pump out propaganda for the machine. So anything of that, a lot of artists kind of fled Europe at that time.
Yeah, there was a lot of people like in his position most likely had to put on this veneer of polite discourse and public acceptance in order to not be targeted, and you wonder how many, like, he could have stayed, he could have been a captain on a boat somewhere, he wouldn't have been persecuted if he chose to do that, and he could have probably had provided for his family, if at least for the next X amount of years until the Nazis fell. But he definitely had his standards and his his own sense of right and wrong and what the Nazis were doing, and that's what made for such a good story and a tense situation at the end there.
Yeah, pretty tense. I think they did a good job with that too when they were trying to get the car out, and and they were just waiting for them in the truck. All that was pretty. All that was really great, and I didn't expect it to be that. I didn't expect it to be that tension filled, but I did wonder at the beginning because you kind of get rumblings that we talked about with the Nazi regime kind of coming up, and I wonder are all these kids going to end up as like SS officers or something? Like, how dark is this going to get? But I think it went the appropriate amount of dark.
Liesel nearly does. Should have taken another step with that twat. She was obviously, it seemed like it was all, young love and the innocence of young love, but actually how that morphed. Again, another kind of little nod to the oppressive nature of how that just captured up the youth at the time. Yeah, that's it's definitely gives the film another layer aside from like banger after banger after banger songs wise.
Yeah, sure, certainly. Yeah, there was no happy songs when the shit went down basically, and the and it even surprised me what they did with Rolf's character. The twat and mention. But he wasn't like turned enough to just gun the guy down in cold blood, but he still had enough sense, to not get in trouble with his superiors by calling out for help and saying, "Hey, I found them. They were escaping." So that I thought that was an interesting compromise for his character to, not be a total sap or a total like, run, I'll cover for you or something like, something campy like that. They actually, it just felt realistic, like how a kid basically who just got, conscripted by the Nazis, and they gave him this uniform, they gave him this gun, and they gave him this responsibility to round these people up, and he's living that, and he can't bring himself to go that extra step and be a real, cold-blooded murderer, but he still wants to prove himself in his position, and and he gives them away by yelling out and starting the whole chase scene there, and I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, excellent.
I love the nun's revenge too. I thought that was great at the end when they sinned and they had the car fire. That was pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. That was great.
The scenes with the nuns are really interesting because again, they're not kind of shown as classic nuns. Even when they're discussing Maria at the start, the how do you solve a problem like Maria, all that kind of stuff. It's very much they know that she's a good person, but she's just constrained by their life. It's not so much about she's been bad or anything. Yeah. And at the end, it's very much like that whole scene and as they're trying to escape and them hiding is tension filled, but it's also kind of very playful as well. Like there's no doubt, these nuns all misdirecting the Nazis. The nuns defeated the Nazis. If only there were more nuns, the war could have ended about 3 years earlier.
Yeah. I really liked that line that the head nun there had from Maria. She said, the nunnery is not a place to hide from the world, but to face your fears. And I thought that was a very good theme that was, running through the film about facing your fears and facing rather than hiding away from them. And I thought that played out with a lot of the characters in here. Yeah. And I like how the nuns were kind of used as they're kind of a sort of an underground railroad,
Yeah.
They scooting people out the back and stuff and helping out with the escape.
The look on their face when the captain said he would perform too. He would perform with the family, and that kind of look he gets. But I like when there were the soldiers waiting for them, and it really gives you that really oppressive feeling like there's nowhere to go, like you're stuck. So all that was really. It's funny how it went from this kind of heartwarming family coming together story to this like you know,
Playing for their
you could
lives.
Nazis are waiting for you. So
Yeah.
it's pretty wild.
But all helped. Like, it still has a jovial nature thanks to the proper MVP of the film, who's Uncle Max, and the whole way through. him thwarting the Nazi generals as well, with a little bit of misdirection and stuff. You know, it's
And third place we have.
Yeah, and they'll take their time.
yeah. It's such a fun character.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of interesting that the film left you kind of wanting more.
Yes, that's right.
They end in flight. They're hiking through the hills. That's the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, of course you have this, like you said, the film's kind of lighthearted, so you have this sense and hope that, okay, they're going to go somewhere and they're going to be fine. But if you really think about it, did they? Were they fine? Did they have a hard time where they went? You don't know. And it kind of really leaves that up to imagination about how you think this family ended up. This is just hiking on the hills.
Did they even survive? They had no food, no water, and those aren't little hills. That's quite the hike. I mean, and how far do they have to travel? There isn't a whole lot out
That's
there.
the Alps.
That's the Alps, yeah. They go into Switzerland, but how did that turn out? It makes you really wonder. And I suppose you could then look at the history of the Von Trapp family and try to piece it together from the actual.
They ended up in Italy, so they made it over the Alps in whatever way. So that is what happened. But it sort of mirrors what you're talking about before, in that it does seem like a natural end because she does escape to the hills.
Yeah,
that is essentially the end of her story arc, because it's been hers the way along. Even though we've had the family and all the other characters go through it, it's about the cycle of her life and going. So it does have some sort of reason for the finish, but you're right. It kind of it doesn't determine the future. It's just sort of their beginning. That end part of the film.
It's a beautiful open-ended story. I thought it was very well done.
And it didn't feel like 3 hours.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so. It had a nice intermission, it didn't feel like I was, when's this going to end? Looking at the watch or anything.
I think because the story turns and it give it fresh impetus. It's not like a continuation of the one story arc and that they fall in love and that's it all over. It is given that bit with the Nazis and the danger right at the end when it needs it, because it does need a shot in the arm to carry that length of film. And be so gripping at the end, because up to that point there wasn't really tension in it. I mean, the only tension before that is what's the captain going to think when he finds out his curtains have been made into clothes for his kids? Like that. I mean, that's the level of stakes we're talking about it before that. But up until that point, there's nothing to it, and then it gets in.
Yeah, the Baroness or the housekeeper or the governess, the Baroness or the governess.
Yeah.
Debbie or the car, right?
Yeah, there's been some films we watched, like Tom Jones, that felt like they lasted forever. But this was 3 hours long. It didn't feel like 3 hours. I was surprised.
Oh, God, we could do with shorter films, though, in general. Like this whole 60s thing of the 3-hour film was,
I
think the next one's like 2 hours, so.
Oh, happy days. Nice. It might feel like 4, though. You never know.
I know Lawrence of Arabia was long, and it was longer than... But Tom Jones actually felt longer than Lawrence of Arabia.
That was rough.
Not sure I agree with that. Like Lawrence of Arabia is a long
it's
film.
a long movie.
Jesus, that's a long film.
That just tells you something. But
and it has a lot of the samey kind of stuff in it. It doesn't have the impetus in Lawrence of Arabia for that. Not trying to run it down or anything, but it sort of is one note a lot of the way through. In terms of what it's trying to do. So yeah.
No, it's funny because we would, like the intermission. kind of signals that change in tension and that change in direction that they were heading in, and that there's a new introduction of story elements going forward from this intermission that where you're gonna face a whole bunch of new fears, and it was well placed and well paced.
I'd comment actually on just general musical theatre, but the intermission, a lot of musicals, right throughout history, peak at the intermission. You know, the first half, the showstopper of the entire show is just before the intermission, and a lot of musicals and stage shows, like that's the way it goes. And the second half just tends to be a little more humdrum and wrapping up the story, the cliffhanger that set up the intermission. Whereas the Sound of Music kind of does turn on its head and becomes a completely different story. In the second half, with stakes and danger and all of that kind of stuff, afterwards, it's only really hinted at in the first half. So it's quite different, I think, than an awful lot of other musicals, whether on stage or screen at that time. Like even My Fair Lady doesn't really have stakes, doesn't really have a drive through the second part of the film. It's just the resolution of their relationship, in a lot of ways, and a realization of their relationship that comes through. You're not so much concerned about her being able to speak properly or any other things that they set up in it. So and similarly with West Side Story, it's like the resolution of their relationship, even though it is sad and poignant and all that kind of stuff towards the end, it is still a continuous that story, whereas this one is, introduce something very different to it, almost like a sequel.
It's the Sound of Music Part 1, Part 2.
Part 2, can you imagine? You imagine the trailer for Part 2 going, more great hits, more murder. Yeah. What's somebody's favorite song from the Sound of Music?
Tough one.
Top banger.
One of my favorite things, I think, would be mine.
Yeah.
Very cheery.
My
favorite things. These are like there's so many. Like it is definitely
it's
one after the other.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. As soon as you say one, that pops into my head and stays there and replaces the one that was in my head.
Yeah.
So.
It has a lot of songs and a lot of great songs in it. Like even something like "Climb Every Mountain" is sort of pushed to the side very quickly. It's by some of the other ones.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, really classics. A lot of them I didn't even know were in this movie that I've heard before that I didn't know where they came from.
They sort of become ingrained in popular culture due to the success of this movie and the use of the songs. Yeah.
What about you, Jared? What was your favorite?
Jeez.
Sophie's Choice. Here we go.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the opening song. I mean, it's just I like the orchestration in it, and I like the expansiveness of it. So it's and it never leaves my head now. I've been singing it for 2 weeks, and I can't stop.
If it's any occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, mine's the Edelweiss side. I think it's the prettiest song of them all, for sure. And I think it's not a Sound of Music song. I think it's a traditional song, that they used in the movie. But it's very pretty and poignant within the movie as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like the favorite things too. I think that's very lyrically clever, and
yeah, it was a good one. It was a banger, as you would say.
A banger, yep, absolutely. One banger after another. Yep.
Yeah. If I was in my 20s, I probably would not like this movie. But I've mellowed in my old age, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed it.
It was a good one.
Where does it rank then?
Wow, we got 6 to rank now?
Yeah.
Well,
I think this is a go to number 2 or 3 for me.
It's high.
The Apartment is number 1. And then there's a toss-up between West Side Story and this one.
Yeah. I think I'll put it at 3. Yeah.
West Side Story, then The Apartment, then this probably, I think. Yeah. So yeah. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of our kind of top films are sort of broadly similar in a lot of ways, which I think is sort of interesting because these are 6 greatest movies of a 6-year period, you know. But
well, except one.
with all the talk this year about the worst Oscar Best Picture nominated ever, and it's like Tom Jones is like, hold my beer, you know, like you know.
I haven't seen Tom Jones, but it's
pretty bad. It's not an Oscar movie. It's not.
Yeah, I would accept that.
You know.
I think, interestingly, one of the greatest musicals of all time also came out this year, but it was an American film. So if anybody likes a musical and wants something else to watch, Jacques Demy's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg came out this year. Again, phenomenally influential. La La Land would not look like La La Land without Umbrellas of Cherbourg, because it mimicked that very, very, the colour palette of that very heavily and stuff. So yeah, it's one of my favourites as well. I love Umbrellas of Cherbourg, but yeah, there's a recommendation if anybody's following along. It's like, we need more musicals. Like, not that there's been enough of them in this Oscars talk already, but yeah.
Cool stuff, though. Yeah, really good one. Yeah. So, Man for All Seasons is next. Have either of you seen it?
I have never seen it. No.
Oh, good.
I think one of Anthony Hopkins' first ever performance, I believe.
Oh, is it Hopkins? Oh,
wow.
Well, no, it's maybe a bit early for Hopkins. I'm getting it mixed up with something else, aren't I? Anyway, I may have just totally mixed something up in my head.
Oh, yeah, it's Paul Schofield, Wendy Hiller, and Leo McKern. Yeah.
It's too early for
A Man for All Seasons.
120 minutes.
1966.
We'll see. Oh, anything else you guys want to add for Sound of Music?
No, I'm good with Sound of Music. I'm definitely glad to be able to chat about it, and I look forward to seeing it another 20 times over the next 10 years.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. So, until 1966, the next one, Jared, where can people find you?
You can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can find me at Speculative Speculations podcast, and some other fine podcasts on Page Doing.
And Chris.
Yeah, you can find me on my own YouTube channel on films at Chris Moen, or you can find me on that same podcast, Speculative Speculations, where we could chat about all good things sci-fi.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, so until next time, thanks everyone for listening and watching along with us, and we will talk to everyone very soon. And we can break into song as soon as we stop recording.